Well, hi everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and it is 8th of October, 2020. Let me just center up a little bit here. Good to see everybody. It's been a lot of absences for me. I've never been this far, been away from Stratosphere Lounge as long as this, but I'm almost done with this Forgotten American Heroes stuff. I've finished the scripts for John Paul Jones, Frank Luke, Booker T. Washington, Ernest Evans, Jimmy Doolittle, and I'm working on Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and then the mystery show. So anyway, thank you for your patience with that, and thanks for sticking with us. I don't like being gone that long, but honestly, I've been eating, writing, and sleeping. That's pretty much it. So that's that, and it's good to see everybody. So let me tell you what I want to do tonight. I was almost going to say that this is what I'd like to do tonight is a rehearsal, but that's not really what it is. It's more of a, it's almost like a table read. A lot of times when you're making a movie or a TV show, in fact, most of the time, you'll do something called a table read. And the the purpose of that is to get all the actors together. You hand out the scripts. In many cases, the actors haven't seen it before. Sometimes they have, but it's basically the time for everybody to get together and play it out and hear how it sounds. So what I want to do tonight is I want to do a table read, not of the American Heroes stuff. I want to do a table read, and I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression here. I want to do a table read of what I'm going to say on the night of the election if Donald Trump loses. We had a pretty memorable show back in 2012. I remember when it was clear that Romney was going to lose. We came on and just basically talked about it. So I personally think that Trump's going to win this election. The polling is terrible, but the polling's always terrible. I know for a fact here that many. It's all going to come down to the shy voters. It's going to come down to the people that either don't answer polls or whatever. But in any event, the fact that we're even discussing this, the fact that it's even close, the fact that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are on the ticket is in a way almost more important than whether or not the election goes this way or not. So when I talk about this as a thought exercise, I don't want anybody to take it as defeatism or anything like that. But nevertheless, it's not just a question of being prepared. It's a question of having a look at where America is now, and so on. Now, Steve Darrow brings up an interesting point. I'm going to be dealing with just the comment stream tonight. Steve, this is one of the things that got me into this mode. Steve asks, how much did it cost you to put up the Hollywood-style Trump sign? Some of you, probably most of you know, that somebody had put a sign on the 405 freeway on the overpass going over Sepulveda Pass. It's the most busy, most heavily traveled road in the world in terms of cars per hour. And someone had put a Trump sign up there, and it lasted for 2 or 3 hours, and it was taken down. Now, I had thought that somebody had gone up there and put it on city property, on the foothills. But I found out either yesterday or today that no, that's not the case. It was on private property, and the city or state or some government officials went onto somebody's private property and tore the sign down. And the justification they used was that it was visually distracting, that it was a hazard to traffic because people were so fixated on the sign that you might get into a crash and so on. So that's the state that I live in now. And there is a non-trivial chance that everything that's wrong with California will be embodied in not the next president of the United States, but the one after that in 6 months. That is entirely possible. So we're going to go with that. we're going to go with that, just so I can be prepared, just so I've got it in my head. I want feedback. I got a lot of things to talk about, a lot of things I've been thinking about. So if we could just start with the understanding that this is a what-if scenario, that the number of people who answering polls and all the rest of it, I don't believe it. Trump's got the enthusiasm, and I think he's going to win. But in any event, the fact that it's this close is deeply, deeply, deeply disturbing. So I want to play you just one thing tonight, that's all. I heard this coming into work today at the studio. Heard it on YouTube. I often listen to YouTube shows on the way in. And I heard this on the way in, and it made my blood run cold, but I'll just run it for you. It's a 30-second commercial, and it ran before the video I was watching or listening to in the car. Tell me what you think of this.
There's a lot of talk about getting back to normal. But in California, normal's never really been our thing anyway. So masks are mandatory. That's our kind of party. Keeping our distance? Can do. And if you're not washing your hands a lot already, maybe you haven't been getting dirty enough. So if this is the new normal, no problem. We'll roll with it, take it in stride, and ride it out. Help California stay safe and open. Learn more at visitcalifornia.com.
I don't think anybody's going to be visiting California. Mandatory masks. And when I heard that, what I heard them say was, if this is the new normal, then we're going to roll with it. That's it. We're gonna roll with it. We'll just accept it, basically. And I don't want to put things in overly. What's the term I'm looking for? Oh, come on. I don't want to overstate the case. Hyperbole. I don't want to overstate the case. But when I watched this, and in reference to something I'll tell you about in a minute, I realized, we all talk about, well, I'm never going to wear a wristband, an armband. No one's going to put a yellow star on me. No one. Well, we don't have yellow stars on our arm. We have blue squares on our faces. And they're mandatory here. And there's no legal basis for it, but nevertheless, it's mandatory here. And since I live in California, at least for the time being, I can see what's coming if the Democrats win this election. And it's really, really, really ugly. Now, I saw a comment on Instapundit, I want to say about a week or 10 days ago, and it went through me like a diamond bullet. It was the most disturbing thing I have read in a long, long, long time. And the reason it disturbed me so much is because I think it's true. It was written by a liberal on this conservative website. I think it was on Instagram, pretty sure. And the comment was something along these lines. They said, you guys, why don't you all just go away? You talk about tyranny, you talk about your guns, you talk about not having, not putting up with all of this stuff, but you're never going to do anything about it. You'll go to the range, you'll fire off some rounds, you'll wave your flags, you'll make your statements, but you're never going to do anything about it. And we know it. Everybody knows it. So just give up. Forget it. And I thought, he's right. He's right. Now, a lot of you are suddenly standing up but just listen to me for a second. The reason that if you have a gun in your house to defend yourself against home invasion, and somebody comes into your home and you shoot that person, and then the police come and take you away, then who's going to start this shooting war? Nobody. The law has criminalized, I'm speaking mostly for California, but it's coming everywhere. The law has criminalized not just conservative behavior in California, they've criminalized sanity, and they have normalized insanity. And that's what's happening here. And so to say, well, we got our guns and stuff and no one's going to take us out of our houses, this is what the realization I had today, guys, and this is why I wanted to talk to you about it. had these guns and the Second Amendment to protect us from the government. And we keep thinking that if the government decides to come for the people, then we'll be ready. We're not going out like in Germany. If the government comes and starts taking us out of our homes and putting us in camps, then that's why we have the guns. That's been the theory, and the theory works. But here's the thing. Here's what I realized. It's not going to be the government coming for us. It's going to be the government saying, come and get us. The government is going to be expecting you to get them. It's not going to be black-shirted guys kicking down doors. It's going to be constant violations of constitutional law, and anybody who reaches the point when they said, I've had enough, then that person will be an individual and they'll be arrested or shot, and that's the end of it. The government isn't coming after us. The government is making our lives unbearable, and then it's basically saying it's waiting for us to come after them. And this is the genius of what they're doing, because that is an entirely different thing. People will fight to defend their lives and their families, but no one that I can think of is going to go out and start shooting because somebody said you have to stay 6 feet apart from each other. So when you look at the numbers, because we were doing the Chronosphere lounges, when you look at the numbers, the actual data, not the projections, you find that of all of the COVID-19 deaths, 94% of them had 2.5 comorbidities, which means that if you take that out of there, the people who died of COVID and had no other comorbidities, most of them were 80 years old or over, and I consider that to be a comorbidity. So the facts are there. The science is there. The data is there. All of this is there. It's there. It's at the CDC website. The actual lethality of this coronavirus is on the CDC website. And those of us that thought we were voluntarily complying because we were facing a major epidemic and 2 million Americans killed, once it became clear, and I'm talking about middle of April, end of April at the latest, once it became clear that this was not happening, all of that goodwill vanished, and then it became clear that no, this is a power grab. And furthermore, Bill de Blasio said that they're not going to reopen New York until there are no new COVID-19 cases. So there you go. So this is the world we find ourselves in, and it's given me a great deal to think about. Who was the guy who's running? I think it was Mike something. Somebody's going to help me in a second. Who said he was talking about the difference between a republic and a democracy, and then everybody jumped on him in Twitter. Mike something or other. That's great because I have a 7-second delay, and then the hive mind answers, and it makes me look a lot smarter than I am. But I heard about this earlier today. Here's no, it wasn't Mike Walsh. It's a candidate, I think. I think it's somebody running for office. In any event, somebody was talking about this idea of democracy and the republic. Is it Mike Lee? Okay. And he's being vilified for it. And then, so just stay with me here for a second. We inherited a republic where our rights were protected by law. And as long as people respected the law and as long as the law was being obeyed, we were fine. But if you think about it, and this I have talked about before, if you think about a society where all of your individual rights and your property are protected by ironclad law, and you get that to start with, then democracy can do nothing but make it worse for you. There is no other way to look at it. If a governor of the state of California was constrained by the law and all of these laws were enforced, it wouldn't matter if the governor of California was a communist, wouldn't matter if he was an arch-conservative. He would not have the power to change the way I live my life, or anybody else's for that matter. He would be constrained by the law, and that law would be binding. And this is the entire reason why we have a republic, or had anyway. So what we get is, we get a republic and we get protections of our rights. And then we have elections, and we elect people who are determined to destroy those rights. And then either through eroding the law or simply disobeying the law, those protections go away. And now we're stuck with a world where our government is the enemy of the American people. And the FBI is complicit in a coup. So, what do we do about this? And now we get to my point here, I think. Again, this is a table read for what I will be talking about in the event that Donald Trump loses the election. If he wins the election, and I still think he will, then we still have some time. But if he doesn't, then this is where I'm going personally in terms of philosophy. The Saturn V rocket was this tall, had enormous engines on the bottom, and the command module was about that big on the top of this thing. And all of the Saturn V was designed to get that command module to the moon and bring it back again. That's all. Everything below it, all of it, the huge, huge structures, huge engines, all of it was designed to get that command module to the moon and back again. And what I'm seeing happening to this country is this. It feels to me like these people with their city values, or people who have no education about how the government works or how it's supposed to work, what it's become is it becomes so much weight, so much just dead weight on this vehicle that it's like we're trying to fly the entire Apollo stack to the moon. The reason we have a first stage is because when it's out of fuel, it's dead weight. It's too much structure. So we sacrifice the engines and we cut it loose. And then the second stage goes and it burns out of fuel, then it is also dead weight and we cut that loose, and so on and so on and so on. We lose the dead weight and we keep on going. We're like a Saturn V that's incapable of staging. It's not going to get to orbit anymore. It was designed to, but because people have been, fooling around and putting bolts between the two stages, it has to carry all of that weight that it was never designed to carry. And when I say dead weight, I'm talking about people who don't understand anything about a republic. They don't understand anything about an economy. I'm talking about communists and progressives who are talking about socialism and anarchy in the streets as they emerge from a fully capitalist society. And they are getting bigger, and we are getting stronger. That's telling me that we're burning out of fuel on this first stage, and it's telling me we need to cut that stage loose. If you are standing on a pier and somebody goes into the ocean, even a dog, I've thought about this many times. A little dog goes over the pier in Santa Monica, I'm going into the water after the dog. I'm a good swimmer, no problem. If a person goes into the water, I'm going in to save that person. I have no doubt about it whatsoever, none. I think about this a lot. And that's good, and that's appropriate. But what do you do if somebody takes an anvil and throws it over the side with a rope and tells you to save the anvil? What do you do? There comes a point when the weight of something is so extreme that no matter what your best efforts are, you cannot stop an anvil from sinking to the bottom of the ocean. If you go into the water and somebody hands you an anvil, you have two choices. You can go down with the anvil or you can let it go. That's it. You are not going to be able to tread water and get that anvil back to shore. And everybody knows this. Everybody knows it. It's obvious. So what I see is it's beginning to look more and more and more like the conservative part of the country. It's feeling like I am out there and I'm holding on to the White Star pennant on the back of the Titanic, and I'm holding on to it, and somehow we're expected to tread water and stop that ship from going down. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. So what do you do in a case like that? What do you do if you're tied to an anvil? Or what if you're grabbing the flag on the end of the Titanic? What do you do? Do you keep pulling on the rope? I've been doing this for 12 years. I've been pulling on this rope for 12 years, and all of you have too. It's not about me. It's about this slide, and I'd love to tell you that this is unique in history, but this is how civilizations go down. So what I'm thinking now is, in the event of a Trump loss, I'm thinking that from this point forward, I am if I cannot stress this highly enough, I'm not being defeatist, I'm just preparing in the event, because I'm a guy who likes to prepare, and I practice engine failures. Hope I don't have one. But what I've been doing, what everybody's been doing, Ben and everybody else, all of us, and all of you, and the Tea Party movement, all of it, what you've all been doing, I got to deal with something. In the comment section, somebody said, start killing communists. That's what needs to happen. And somebody else says, yeah, good idea. I agree, but how is that going to happen? The only way you kill communists is if they knock on your door, kick your door in, and you defend yourself. They'll probably take you out too, but that's the entire idea, right? We make it too costly. But what if? What if? As I say, the government's not coming after you. The government's doing whatever it wants, and it's waiting for you to come after them. Who's going to walk up and shoot communists? And what's going to happen to you if you do? So let me just come back to this. All of us, all of you, the whole conservative movement has been holding on to a rope and being pulled towards the edge of a cliff and digging our feet in as much as we possibly can, because we have the education and we have the historical knowledge and we have the knowledge of human nature to know what's going to happen if we don't. But now I see things getting so much worse that if this election should go to the Democrats and the Senate as well, if that happens, then I'm going to change my strategy. I'm going to change my strategy. And that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about tonight. If that happens, I'm no longer going to pull on that rope. I'm not going to pull on the rope trying to turn the rest of the country around. It's the flag on the back of the Titanic. That happens. If people vote for Democrats after watching what's been happening in the streets of Los Angeles and Portland and all the rest of it, if they win, if they win, then that means that American society is in such trouble that I am no longer going to try and pull on that rope. I'm going to cut the rope. I'm going to cut the rope. I'm going to let that go. And instead of me going down to the bottom of the ocean with the anvil, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start thinking about how do we protect this thing that cannot die under any circumstances, that we cannot allow to die under any circumstances, this entire idea of freedom, responsibility, free markets, all of it. It's got to stay alive. So what do we do? If what we want, if our child, let's say, is in a life preserver and the child is anchored to an anvil by a rope and somebody throws the anvil in the water, what do? You've got no choice. You have to cut the rope and save the child. And the anvil's going down one way or another. It's either going to take your kid with it or it's not, but it's going down. And the more I watch of this, the more of this intellectual rot and moral rot that I see, the more I think of the fact that what we should be thinking about in the event of this election going that way is we need to be thinking about what does it look like to cut the rope of the culture that is going downhill so fast that you can't keep track of it. What does that look like? How does it work? It's easy to say, but what does it mean? The country is divided into, and I think it's pretty nearly these actual numbers. The country's split three ways. There are conservatives who get everything. They understand the uniqueness of the country. They understand American exceptionalism. They understand the cost of it. They understand the sacrifices that people have made. They love their country. They're proud of their country. They got a lot to be proud of. That's a third of the country. There is a third of the country that hates this country. They were raised to hate this country, and we allowed it. But that ship has sailed. We allowed it, and they spent the last 50 years teaching people to hate this country. So there's a third of the country that are committed socialists, at least they think they are, and they are going to vote Democrat. And if it turns out that the rules don't favor them, they'll change the rules. If Donald Trump gets this third conservative justice on the bench, if we get that vote, then the Democrats will simply change the rules. The fact that she wouldn't deny it and Biden wouldn't deny it, we'll have a 6-3 majority on the court, and then they'll just put 5 liberal judges on there, or 10. And there's nothing to stop them. Who is going to go to Washington and kick down doors with a rifle if that happens? You could say you will, and I would support certainly emotionally anybody who does, but it's not going to happen. At the very least, it's not going to happen successfully. We have to face the reality of the world that we live in. We have to face the reality of it. And that's how far things have fallen here, and the compliance with these masks. And I'm one of them. I'm not trying to get myself off the hook. I'm one of them. I live in a state where it's mandatory to wear a mask. You go into a building, so I do. I'm not in any position to brag. I'm not in any position to boast. I'm ashamed of it, and I'm giving serious thought to getting out of this particular place. But we will see. That's not the point. It's got nothing to do with me. I just want to make it clear that I'm not trying to say that this is other people, when in fact it is not other people. It's me as well. But this is the reality, guys, and we're going to have to learn how to face it. So, anyway, if we're going to cut the rope, what does that look like? What does it mean? Well, a third of the country gets America. A third of the country hates America. And a third of the country goes where other people go, and that middle third you cannot blame for this. If all you hear is that Donald Trump has totally botched the coronavirus response, as one of thousands of examples on a daily basis, if Americans are convinced that he botched this response and that he's a tyrant and all the rest, if that middle third of the country goes to the Democrats, and that's what I'm talking about here, then what that means is it means, despite the internet and all the rest of it, the news media and the entire mainstream media is so powerful that it cannot be overcome. And the cultural indoctrination that's going on for young people means that time is not on our side. All of these things are deeply disturbing to me, but I'm not the kind of person who says, well, screw it, it's just too bad, we're going to go. And I'm not the kind of person who says, I'm going to go pack some beans and go live in the hills and just, it's not going to be a problem for me because I'll be dead when all this happens. I'm not built that way. I'm trying to figure out what we do in the face of the reality that we're looking at now. We have destroyed the economy of this country in order to make sure Donald Trump doesn't get elected. And we've allowed that to happen for a disease that has a 98.4% survival rate for people 80 and over who happen to contract the disease. And that's just it, and you hear stories. We did a right angle show about this just a couple days ago. And Scott talked about this this thing that somebody sent him about a family that's grieving in a funeral home in Great Britain, and they're sitting there 10 feet apart, and they've got their masks on, and all the rest of these compliance things. And mom's crying, and the two children are crying, and so one of the boys moves next to mom, puts his arm around her. Then another child does the same thing, and then a guy whose fault it's not this funeral director's fault. He's going to lose his business if he doesn't do this, goes forward and separates them by 10 feet. And I said during that episode, if you are in favor of separating those people, then there's something fundamentally wrong with you. And there's something fundamentally wrong with an awful, 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 awful lot of people today. An awful lot of people. Lots and lots and lots of people responded to that by saying, well, if you don't social distance, then then there's just going to be more funerals. Okay. All right. So what we're facing a middle, forget the left, we're facing a middle of the country that has been told 24 hours a day that the left and the Democrats are the party of science, and that the Republicans are just a bunch of hayseeds who don't believe in any of the science. No one is strong enough, including the president, to effectively make the case that the CDC's own numbers tell us that this whole thing was an overreaction. You can't blame people for overreacting, but you can start blaming them once it's clear they've overreacted. So what do? What does that look like? I don't know how many of you agree with this. I know a lot of people that I've talked to about this. If one state in the union were to basically just throw this whole thing off and just declare independence or whatever and say, we are America, we're taking the Constitution with us, and this time we're going to make sure that the laws of the Constitution are enforced. If there was one conservative state in the union, then I have no doubt whatsoever that that population of that state would grow by 60 to 70 million people in the course of a few months. And I also believe that in 3 to 5 years, its GDP would exceed that of the other 49 states. But again, what are we dealing with? People saying Texas. Yeah, well, great. So what's the reality? The reality is that these idiots screw up California, which used to be a aerospace, agriculture, all of it. These idiots screw up California. They totally destroy it. Then they leave and they go to Texas, and then they start voting like Californians in Texas. And if you can't stop that, if you can't stop that dynamic, then all you're doing is spreading the insanity. How do you stop that? How? That's the issue for me, honestly. That to me is the actual core of the issue. What do you do with people who vote a system that causes their neighborhoods to be destroyed, and then they go to a place that is the antithesis of what they believe politically because it's working and it's safe and it's free and it's prosperous, and once they get there, they start voting the exact same way that they did when they screwed up the last campsite? How do you deal with that? And you better have a way to deal with it. Because if you don't, then all this is pressing California out of California. It's pressing Californians out of California and infecting the entire country. That's the only word for it. If you leave a state because the people you voted for have screwed it up so badly, and you take those policies with you, you shouldn't be allowed to enter the state. Period. And I honestly think that if a state or something like that were to go out of the union, I would say, and I'd be willing to submit to this, absolutely I would be willing to submit. I think you ought to say something to the effect of, if you move to the Republic of X, you don't get to vote for 10 years or 20. That's it. Those are the terms. You don't get to vote for 10 years or 20 years or whatever. Yeah, people are saying in the comment section, people are seeing shirts that say, "Don't California my Alabama." 40 years ago, I heard of Oregon having bumper stickers that say, "Don't Californicate Oregon." And now Oregon is more Californicated than California is. So what do you do? What do you do? What is the mechanism of that? How does it work? And then what else happens? It's how is Utah going to leave the union? How is there ever going to be a conservative state? I'm asking because I want some feedback. I'm just asking because this is a serious issue. And what do you say? If Utah goes, it's landlocked on 4 sides. How do you get in and out of that country without having to fly over what used to be America? How do you do it? How do you do it? Texas at least has a border with has a shoreline. Texas has a shoreline with the Gulf of Mexico. And if Texas left, you probably could take Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama with you too. I'm not so sure about Florida. In fact, I doubt Florida. So then you've got a coastline. Okay, so that's something you can manage. Texas used to be a country. It could be a country again. Great. What do you do? What do you do if that were to happen and Texas became like this conservative haven, and it worked, and the rest of the country didn't, and then the rest of the country moves to Texas? Now, if it was its own state, then then it'd be an immigration issue. But what do you do? How do you cut this cable? How do you disconnect yourself from this cultural anvil that's going down? How? This is not a theoretical problem anymore for me. This is a practical issue now. And everybody's thinking about it and talking about it. Liberals are talking about leaving the union if Trump's reelected, talking about taking California out of the union if Trump's reelected. If that happens, I'd vote for that in a heartbeat. I would say, yes, I'm a Californian. I'm completely in favor of it. California can go, can take its 52 electoral votes with them, and then I'll move to America. So we're facing real trouble here. And we're facing the same kind of trouble that every civilization has faced. So what do you do? I don't have a lot of answers, but I just have some rough ideas, and that's why I wanted to kind of rehearse this worst case scenario speech. And by the way, once again, I got to keep saying this every 10 or 15 minutes only because I don't want people to come into it in the middle and make it clear. I am talking about this for the same reason that Richard Nixon wrote a speech on what to say if the Apollo 11 astronauts died on the moon. That's not saying you think it's going to happen, and it's not saying you hope it happens, and it's not overreaction. It's just plain planning. It's just that's how adults live in the world. They hope for the best, plan for the worst. So what happens? Well, we don't have a dividing line, a geographic dividing line in the 1850s and 60s. Most of the people who felt one way about slavery lived north of the Mason-Dixon line, and most of the people who felt differently about slavery lived south of it. And when the war started, there were many people who were Northerners who agreed with the South and Southerners who agreed with the North, and they physically moved, and then you had borders, then you have an actual two countries and the war and all the rest. But what do you do when the people who live next door to you are 100% antithetical to what you believe politically, and unlike the old days where that was just fine, now through social media and through this creeping loss of government control of the government, now that person gets to vote for things that invade your house. And I just want to deal with this. Terry and Jane said, Bill, 2 weeks ago you were saying that Trump would win all 50 states. Have you lost hope? No, I haven't lost hope. But I did not expect Joe Biden to be able to finish the debate. And that's why when Trump was constantly interrupting Biden during that debate, I was screaming at the TV, just shut up. Shut up. This is what I'm screaming to the president. I'm saying, shut up. And I'm saying shut up because I don't think Joe Biden can finish a 10-second sentence. But if he only goes 5 seconds before being interrupted, you got to give him a chance to bury himself. And it was really horrifying. And every time Biden did get a chance to talk, you could see him starting to lose his cool. But when every 5 seconds he's being interrupted, he doesn't have to think more than 5 seconds at a time. It was appalling, and this coverage and everything else has reached such a fever peak that I just don't know anymore. The polls are terrible. Now, we saw terrible polls before, but what the pollsters are saying is that Trump is more popular than he was in 2016, but Biden is far more popular than Hillary was. Ed Smith just said, last night's debate didn't change anything for you, Bill? What it changed for me was it made me look at this and said, geez, that Mike Pence would be a fine president. And I'm not abandoning Donald Trump at all. No, Mike Pence could never have been president on his own. But watching Pence, I thought, I remember this. An adult, an informed, unemotional, well, not completely unemotional, but not controlled by his emotions, a composed, serious man, a serious adult. And yeah, Ray Bannon for president. Well, why didn't I think of that? Dave Big Booty gets it. Yeah, Ray Bannon. It's what he should do. He is Ray Bannon. And watching it, I thought, he kept going on after his time was over. And by the way, why do when you start looking at root causes of this, why do we do this? Why do we have a debate moderated by a guy who's clearly a left winger, and then this one was the VP debate was moderated by a woman who wrote a glowing biography of Nancy Pelosi, and the next one is apparently, if it happens, moderated by a former Joe Biden apprentice. Why do we put up with this? Why? Why do we accept this? Why? Because we're law-abiding people. Because I don't know why. I don't know why. It's part of it is just Stockholm syndrome. We've just been so beaten up by our own culture for so long now. But again, just for the sake of the argument, I am not going to play that game about what do we have to do to change the country anymore. That's if that election goes south, then that ship has sailed. So what do we do? What do the rest of us do? What does the third of the country that understands this country and work and all the rest of it do? The middle third is movable. The other third is not. What do we do? I've been saying from the beginning that the only way to cure people of socialism is to give it to them. Well, in the event that the Democrats win the presidency and the Senate, then Americans are going to have a chance to have the California experience come right into their homes. And that is not a remote possibility anymore. So, what do we do if that happens? I'm just trying to have some things thought out in advance in case I have to have this speech live. We have some advantages and we have some tools. And the internet is obviously the biggest one. The internet has driven people crazy. The internet has made people insane. Roy Hamill says, how do you come back from socialism? Well, I guess you let people suffer for 40 years, Roy, or 80, or whatever it takes. I'm not willing to go there. I can't stop the third of the country that is heading there full steam anymore. I'm just saying, I can't hold on to that ship. So what do we do? Well, I was just walking this through and just thinking about some things, and some of these things we talked about before, back in the day. One of the things I thought of is if it turns out that they raise taxes and I had to cut staff, I would fire the people that voted for the higher taxes. That's the first thing I would do. And I think when you say, what can we do? I think the only thing you can do is do what's actually happening now, but you just got to turn up the contrast. You have to basically set up two Americas and make it clear. And you don't even have to make it clear. It's happening every day. It used to be like you couldn't believe the rate to rent a truck from L.A. to Dallas was 5 or 8 or 10 times what it was to rent it the other way. Now I don't even think you can get the truck anymore. So I live in a state that just passed a law or a statement or whatever we use for what used to be the law, a declaration, a decree, a dictate, a whim, that said that if you're eating outdoors in your 10-foot separation patio, which restaurants are hanging on by their fingernails out here, then you're supposed to put your mask on between bites of food. That's the level of virtue signaling insanity we have in this state. Okay, that's what's coming if the election goes that way. It's coming for the whole country. So what do we do about it? Well, it seems to me that the first thing that you would do is try to. It would be great if you could geographically concentrate. And I don't see much alternative to that, honestly. But what's happening? Look, it's actually really simple, folks. It's really, really, really simple. Here's what's happening. It's taken 120 years at least, but what's happening is that finally in this country, the weight of the vote of the people who live in cities has become so great that it's not only influenced who gets elected, but it has allowed them to elect people who are destroying the rules that were there in the first place. So if you look at California, California's a red state. If you take out the San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego population centers, the whole country's red, blood red, from coast to coast, except for these population centers. But since we have a democracy instead of a republic, which would have protected us, but we decided we're not going to follow those laws. We're just going to allow people to break them, like allowing Al Franken to steal an election. He stole the election. Everybody knows it. You know it. I know it. Franken knows it. The Democrats know it. What did we do about it? Nothing. We did nothing about it. What have we done about these lockdowns? Nothing. Not a thing. So, what do we do? One thing that I think you could anyone who wears a mask is better than me, says Trevor, sarcastically, I assume. Yeah. So the people who are claiming to be on the side of science are telling me, a healthy individual with no comorbidities, that I've only got, assuming I contract COVID-19, which apparently I would have a 20 or 30% chance maybe of contracting. Assuming that happens, my survival rate would be down to 99.98%. Therefore, goodbye movie theaters, goodbye restaurants, goodbye everything. The people in this state, I don't know how much it's different for everybody around the country, but here, it is crystal clear to me and crystal clear to people who live here that the reason that they want people wearing masks is because every single day, the sign of people wearing masks is a visual reward for them It is an affirmation that we are doing exactly what they tell them, no matter how much we complain about it, how much we bitch about it, and so on. And people are saying, well, you need to get out of California. No, California is coming after you. This is the point. If that election goes that way, you're going to have a president of the United States who slept her way to the top of California politics and who is the most liberal senator in the Senate. That's who's going to be president of the United States. And it's going to happen within a year from now. If Trump loses that election, that's going to be the president of the United States. What do you do? What do you do? Maybe the mask is the yellow star. It is. You got it, Aesop. That's exactly right. The mask is the yellow star. This thing is the sign of compliance. This is the sign of compliance. It's basically a giant arrow pointing to me. I'm not making the case for anybody else. Pointing to me saying, yeah, I'm not going to do anything about this because I don't want to get killed. Because these people have the law on their side now, and the only thing I can do is to go in there and go someplace with guns blazing, in which case I may or may not kill innocent people, and that's the end of me and the movement and everything else. That's where we are. And if you say, well, get out of California, that's kind of the problem, isn't it? Isn't the problem that Californians are getting out of California? Of all the things I see in the country right now, the thing that depresses me the most by a wide margin is watching Californians go to other states and turn them blue. I don't know what to do. Anyway, one thing that I thought about is, some kind of geographical concentration would be great. There's nowhere else in the world to go. There's not like places out there to go. I am not going to go live in a jungle in Bolivia or South America or Africa or Southeast Asia. I'm just not. And I don't want to give up the territory either. So what do people who live in the country do to defy the extra constitutional laws and mandates of the people that live in the cities? Because it's city people that are putting this on us. It's people who take the subway who are terrified, and they're voting. And they're voting for people who have legal authority over people who ride a horse. So, I'm not leaving this country, and I'm not giving up my citizenship. Not unless it's for a freer place than this, and there's no place like that on Earth right now. People talk about going Galt, and going Galt is actually a pretty good idea, but you got to go further than that. You can't just go Galt. For those of you who are not familiar with it, and I'm sure that's very few of you, but in Ayn Rand's book Atlas Shrugged, the entire premise of the book was that all of the productive, hardworking people who wanted to be left alone and who are going to, the people who make things happen and keep the world turning. Not just brilliant inventors, but policemen and soldiers and, all those folks. They leave society, and then once they leave, society collapses. And I'm fine about that. But when that happened in the novel, they didn't just disappear. They went somewhere else. And that's not really talked about much. But it needs to be. Because if you took the productive third of the country and you were able to, I don't want to say influence or manipulate. That's the opposite of what I'm trying to say. But if you were to find a way for the productive people of the country to do business with other productive people of the country at the exclusion of the people who are voting for this stuff, then you could actually have a pretty big, a pretty big influence, pretty big effect. There's a premise that I should have started this entire conversation with. And I wish I had, and I'm sorry I didn't start with it, but I'll give it to you now. The first question that I ask myself is, what if I'm wrong? In other words, what if everything that I believe about freedom, capitalism, individual rights and responsibilities, freedom of speech. What if I'm wrong about all of these things? What if these things were something that were valuable at the time but aren't valuable anymore? It's what a third of the country thinks. They think it's all just obsolete. What if I'm wrong? What if they're right? And I think about this seriously. So I ask myself, well, what does the world look like where they have their way? What does America look like where the values of progressivism are most in place? And I get Portland and Seattle. I get things burning down. I see murders in the streets. I see absolute lack of law. And I see murder rates that are quintupling. I see race riots where people used to be neighbors. I see constant animosity. I see a group of people, white people, mostly white male people, mostly white male straight people, mostly white male straight Christian people, being more and more marginalized and being told that they're not allowed to have an opinion on anything. And what I see is, I see a world that is on fire. If I look for progressive values in America right now, the most progressive cities I see are Seattle and Portland, and they're on fire. They're burning. So that tells me that I'm not wrong. That tells me that my values are not wrong. It tells me that the values that I hold are the values that value individuals, and that means that my neighbor is my neighbor. And if he's a good guy, he's a good guy, and if he's not, he's not. It doesn't matter what he looks like, and it doesn't matter his color, and it doesn't matter anything. I don't owe this guy reparations because he's 7 generations from slavery, and so am I. My family wasn't in the country when slavery was here, and his probably wasn't either. But when I look at where the left's values are in place, that's what I see. Now, if I saw progressivism and I saw socialized medicine and I saw loss of freedom of speech and all the hate speech stuff and if I saw all of that, and I saw people living happier, and I saw people being friendlier, and I saw healthcare getting better, and all of those things, then I would just come to the conclusion that, well, I'm probably not going to change my mind, but I'm clearly wrong. I may find it repulsive that people have given up their rights, but they seem to be happy and everything's working and great. But it's not what I see. It's not what's out there. Yeah, Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, Milwaukee. Thanks, Mobile Modem. And every other major city. So here's the way to look at it. Picture the United States of America. Picture, if you've ever seen it, if you haven't, you need to. Picture the election map of last election, 2016, on a county-by-county basis. And what you see is a country that is entirely red with blue stains where the population centers are. And if you take the COVID-19 deaths and put those on a map of the United States and you overlay them, it is a 1-to-1 correlation. So the people that live in the cities, who pack themselves into subways every day, are terrified about this virus, and rightfully so, because the subway car is a virus factory. The reason that the deaths have been so low here in California and the rest of the country is that every day I drive to work in my own airtight, positive pressure virus isolation capsule, which happens to have 360 horsepower behind it. But that's basically it. So the values of people who live in the city are being enforced on people who live in the country. Now, our friend, here's something. It's, one of the things you could do is stop watching and listening to the media. Do not argue their wrongness, just flat ignore them as if they do not even exist. This has been the problem. This has been the problem. We walk away from our own pop culture and we allow them to own it, and we allow them to turn us into villains. And all of the people that we had as heroes, they've been co-opted and just, we walked away from the culture, but they didn't. And to say ignore them is to say, okay, because I think this is actually very, very close to being real. There's a third of the country that's left that's down for all of this stuff, and they don't give a damn about rights. They don't understand any of it. There's a third of the country that understands this country and is resisting it tooth and nail. And then there's that middle third, and that middle third only hears one side of the story. And despite the internet, we can't reach them. So If that's the case, and to me it seems absolutely the case, then what I'm thinking is, well, all right, if we can't save the whole country, let's save the third that we can save. And if we do that, then the middle third will see that it's working, and then you might have the votes to go back and recover the entire country. But when you have things like the abuse of the Commerce Clause, for example, and all of this stuff, Mike Lee, who made that comment, of people saying, well, now I have another reason not to vote for Republicans ever because he says democracy is not really that important. I'll go further than that. If you had a republic that protected individual rights and properties, then all democracy can do is make it worse. It's just simply, it is absolutely nothing. All it can do is vote to change the things that were protecting you in the first place. And if everybody's rights were protected, you wouldn't need a democracy. There'd be like an administrative staff to run the gears of the country. It wouldn't matter. Like I said, if the governor didn't have the power to lock me in my house or power to shut down restaurants, it wouldn't matter if he's a communist or not. But that's not how it works. So, and it gets worse every day because we're getting funneled into narrower and narrower and narrower information streams, and evidence is lost. Now they think that, well, we're Republicans and so we don't believe in science, so obviously we don't pay any attention to the evidence because COVID-19 is a deadly plague. But the evidence says, the CDC evidence, not the Rush Limbaugh Network evidence, the CDC evidence says that of the people who died, 94% of them had 2.5 comorbidities, meaning they probably wouldn't have survived another month or two anyway. You take those people out of it, and you left with 9,000 people, maybe 10, who died of this Chinese virus. And of those people, most of them are 80 or older. Who's listening to the science here? Well, when I see Trump or even Pence last night get a global warming question, I just don't know what to say. My response to this would be, Mr. Whittle, do you believe in global warming and climate change, and do you think it's an existential threat to the country or the world? I think that's what they said last night. And I would say it is categorically not an existential threat to the world. Absolutely not. And I can give you the science to back that up. The short-term science is that we were told in 2005, and earlier than that even, that we had 10 years to save the planet. And they were running ads on specials on ABC News in 2005 saying if we didn't do something by 2015, New York's going to be under a foot of water. Well, it's not. And every time that they make a revision to try to explain the fact that it's not doing what they said it's going to do based on a computer model. But I'll go much further than that. People are telling you if we get to 450 parts per million carbon dioxide, that's the end of the world. The world is going to die. That's what people believe. 80 million years ago, in Kansas, where Kansas is today, carbon dioxide levels weren't 450, they were 3,000 parts per million. 3,000 parts per million. And the whole center of the country was an inland sea. And there was life everywhere. Everywhere. That was 80 million years ago. 80,000 years ago, carbon dioxide levels got down to almost 100 parts per million, and if it got too low, then that would kill the plants, and that'd be the end of that. So if you're trying to tell me that a planet that is not only surviving but is thriving at 3,000 parts per million, and you're telling me the world's going to end if we make it to 450, then I'm saying you don't understand anything about science or anything else. There's nobody on this planet, there's not a climatologist on this planet who will deny that there was 3,000 parts per million back 80 million years ago. And so then the question becomes, okay, well, at 3,000 parts per million, the polar ice caps had melted and America was underneath 1,000 feet of water, mile of water, more than that, 5,000 feet of water. Do you want that? No, I don't. I don't want that. So now we're talking about what do we do to deal with the incremental change that's been going on from the beginning. But no one makes that argument. If I had 30 seconds on a debate, if I had 30 seconds, I'd close that argument down. Because then I would say it's not the end of the world. It is a problem, and it's an engineering problem. And it's not as serious an engineering problem as people say. But to say it's the end of the world is a lie. And the scientists know it, and those people know it, and you know it too, Mr. Former Vice President, although I don't think he knows anything. So where are the people that do this? Where are they? This is the other part of the equation, and another part of the equation. The left and the media, same thing. They have made politics for anybody who is a Republican. They have made it. They've made it insufferable. They've made it unbearable. When I saw what they did to Brett Kavanaugh, I said to myself, why in God's name would anyone put themselves through this? Why? The Titanic is going down. And the fact that half of the country thinks that Brett Kavanaugh is a rapist sitting on the Supreme Court is telling me that that it may not be possible to overcome this media megaphone. So if the media megaphone is going out to the whole country, and 1/3 of the country believes it, and 1/3 of the country believes whatever they hear, and the other third of the country knows that it's not true, then we can either stay with the other 2/3 and go down with it, or we can cut that rope and we can float what's going to float and keep alive what's alive, and then by sheer example make it clear to people. But things have to happen to change what's going on now. Things have to happen so that Californians can't go into other states and turn them into California. And I guess we'll go to comments. I said I wasn't going to take questions tonight, and I'm not. I'm going to just deal with the live comment stream. But basically, folks, here it is. You cannot say that that's California and screw them. There's an excellent chance. I don't think it's a majority chance, but it's certainly not a trivial chance that the president, after the president who's sworn in January, will be a communist from California who doesn't know anything, who basically slept her way to the top, got into a romance with Governor Ed Bradley, I think it was. Not Bradley. I don't know. I think it was Bradley. Anyway, that's who's going to be president. That's going to be the commander-in-chief. And as California continues to become more and more of a failed state, people are going to leave California, and they're going to go other places. And most of them, was it Willie Brown? Thank you. Most of them are going to vote the way they voted before they left. How do you fight that? How do you fight that? That's my reactor core. Somebody said they just noticed the blue pulsating light behind me. I've got some LEDs around lights up here, and it's reflecting off of Dave Bowman's terrified thing. So I'm curious. I'm curious to know. I wanted this to be a feedback session. Like I said, it's a table read. It's a presentation of a case. It's an elevator pitch, and I want to know how to make the pitch better. And I also want to know if you think the whole pitch is just plain insane, because I'll save myself the embarrassment of it. But that's what I'm thinking about right now. So I'm just going to watch the comment section, and I want to know what people think. So, what do you think? Everybody's typing like maniacs now. Parallel structures, says Steve Darrow. Yeah, we talked about this. What was it now? 8 years ago with the common sense resistance. Now Tom Bombadil says something interesting. He says, "I'm starting to think it's time to break up the country," and I think you're right. And I think the problem with America is not that it's too liberal. I think the problem with America is that it's too big. When you have a budget that is so large that tens of billions of dollars can disappear as a rounding error, that is not a manageable society. You often hear people say, well, this is non-discretionary spending. You can't touch it. What do you mean? Well, you can cut defense to zero if you want to, but you can't cut social entitlements. Why not? Because it's because it's a promise. It's non-discretionary spending. You have to pay that. And I'm saying, if you can't cut that, then you're saying that the government that we live in is a machine that no one can stop. It's a machine that is going in a certain direction, and you cannot put the brakes on it. You're not allowed to. If you were to take, just as a thought experiment, if you were to take Texas out of the Union, and with it, you would take the Texas National Guard, Air National Guard, and all the rest of it. Then I think that Texas would have a perfect right to control their own borders and say, we're going to admit into Texas whoever we think would be a good fit for Texas. And the rules of the new republic are, if you move to Texas, you agree that you're not going to vote for 20 years. That would mean I wouldn't vote until I was 83. I would agree to that in a heartbeat. That's fair. That sounds fair to me. Coming from the source of all of this nut jobbiness, if somebody said to me, you can move into our state now, but because you're from California, you don't get to vote for 20 years until you've been here long enough to understand what this place is like before you start screwing it up, I'd say, no problem. No problem. And so, DCG 44S said, Texas, secede? Hell, y'all be lucky if we don't invade. That's the attitude I want to hear. And what about things like aircraft carriers and all of that stuff? It is entirely possible. I read today, this is another reason that I'm on this particular roll. I read today that there's some serious discussion that Joe Biden may decide to eliminate our ICBM Minuteman force. He may just decide just to cut it. What happens if what I want to know, this is not a rhetorical question. I would like somebody to explain to me, if Kamala Harris became president of the United States and she decided that she was going to scrap our carrier forces, carrier battle groups, they used to be called back when they were about fighting a war. Now they're carrier strike groups. If she says, as president, I don't think we need them anymore, I'm gonna just sell them for scrap. What could stop them? What could stop them? I don't know. It's not a trick question. I don't know. How would you stop them? What would you do? My theory would be, if I was living in the Texas Republic and the United States said that they're going to scrap all their aircraft carriers, I would say, well, we'll buy them from you. You say you need money for your social programs, we'll give you $50 million for each one of them. The military would turn their backs on the commie bastards. I agree, Merlin. Most of them would, but some of them are commie bastards, because Barack Obama didn't just appoint high-level generals. Barack Obama made it intolerable to be in the military. I know 4 people that left because of what they turned the military into. And this whole thing with the SEALs recently, the SEALs have their creed, and the Navy has reworded it. We're no longer brothers. Now we're warriors together, and they took all the men stuff out of it so that women can be SEALs too. And Donald Trump said, it's ridiculous. I'm going to order that overturned right now. I don't like the idea of orders just being able to be issued, but for God's sakes, if that doesn't tell you to vote for the guy, then I don't know what will, But I don't know what to do about this. I am quite certain that my theory about staging is correct. That if you look at history, what you find is when civilizations are going down, a group of people get out of there and they become the kernel, the seed corn for something new. And that's, if this election goes that way, and I still don't think it will, but if it goes that way, then I'm not going down with the rest of the country, and I'm not going to start opening fire on people either. Yeah. DFRSS again says Taiwan is the real China. I just finished doing the Doolittle Raiders, and these guys were constantly talking about how generous these Chinese were, and how grateful they were, and how wonderful they were, and how warm and how friendly. And I thought, what the hell happened to China? And then I realized, no, he's talking about Chiang Kai-shek's forces. They're in Taiwan. That's not China. If the Americans on the Doolittle raid had been captured by, oh, hi Julius, sorry, if the Americans had been captured by the communist Chinese, that would have been a whole different story. So, yeah, and Flipster64 says, if a chick can do the SEAL thing, then I'm all for calling her a brother. I attempted to agree, but on this one I don't agree. That it's not just a question in that particular case. Now you're talking about built-in, hardwired biological responses, and a female SEAL would not be treated the same way as a male SEAL would be by the other SEALs. I'm sorry, I'm not tall enough to play in the NBA, and my eyesight's not good enough to be a fighter pilot. Too bad for me. Life doesn't guarantee me everything I want. And that's another thing. Anyway, I think I'm right about this business about no longer trying to hold on to this rope and tread water with your hand on the flag on the back of the Titanic. I think it's time to start thinking seriously about how do we protect this? How do we keep it alive? The one thing I am sure of is whatever would survive this has to be much smaller. It's just way too big. It needs to be much smaller, and it has to be small enough so that people can see the granularity of it. Like I said, if you have annually, if you spend $4,000 billion, which is almost inconceivable, but that's what we spend, $4,000 billion a year, and 1,000 billion of that is money we don't have. We're just printing it. That's unmanageable. It's unmanageable. It's just too big, and it's too successful. And that's ultimately it, right? Ultimately, that's it. The reason all of this is going on is because our military and our police have been so effective, and our businessmen and our productivity, all of it. Because if we were constantly having to fight and deal with wolves at the door, we couldn't afford to be this stupid. So the next task is shaping and planning the lifeboat. Except that, and see, this is one thing I have some experience with. We've been talking about this in the prior years during Obama. We were talking about this as a lifeboat. This is a mistake, because if you think about this strategy as the lifeboat strategy, then what you're thinking is, here's this gigantic, beautiful ship, and all that's left is this tiny, tiny, tiny little wooden thing. Much better to think that this is the third, this is the aft third of the Titanic, and we've got watertight doors, and 2/3 of it are going down, but the other third's going to float. We are not a lifeboat. This is not a lifeboat philosophy. This stuff that we're talking about. A full third of the country believes this and is ready to die for it, and has been for 250 years. To say that it's a lifeboat is to minimize the number of people that are a part of this, that are patriots and that understand what's at risk and so on. So I always try to avoid the kind of errors that I see in history, and one of the great errors in history was during the Russian Revolution, before the Bolsheviks took power. They were constantly having arguments, and Lenin basically said, well, we're the Bolshevik party. Bolshevik means majority. They weren't the majority, or nothing like the majority. He just declared that we're the majority. And the idiots on the other side agreed to be called the minority. So when you hear Bolshevik, it means majority, and 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 they just let them do it. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to give them any kind of rhetorical advantage like that. I was watching something else today. All these kind of a perfect storm of things, and I was watching a thing on Frank Luntz and talking about the power of language, and he said it's not what you say, it's what they hear, and that is it. So, what happens? Just chuck something else out there. What happens to conservative states now? What happens if you live in Utah or Texas or, the countryside of Georgia or countryside of California, for that matter? What happens to them? What happens if you live in a deep red state? What happens to you? You can't avoid the federal income tax, and since there are no longer any protections against what the majority decides to do to you, you're kind of stuck. If it turns out that Democrats get the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and just as an example, if they want to mandate the wearing of masks and make it federal law, again, it's not a rhetorical question. What happens then? What happens? And this comes back to the whole idea of geography, because if you were in a Texas county as far away from Austin as you could get, and a federal law like that came down, then the law would have to be enforced by law enforcement, and in that case, the law enforcement would be a sheriff, and the sheriff wouldn't do it. Sheriff just wouldn't do it. So now you start to get into the problem of the mix. And when I say the problem of the mix, I mean the problem of having more Californians in Texas than, speaking hyperbolically. But the problem is that California fails, Texas succeeds. This is just data. You don't have to be a genius. Just check the U-Haul rental prices. If California fails and Texas succeeds, and Californians move to Texas, again, I'm speaking in hyperbole, but they move to Texas and they then outnumber the Texans, what do you do? What do you do? It seems to me that the only way you can do that is to have a border and enforce immigration. And require a citizenship test and a math test. Yeah. This idea that requiring you to pass the same kind of test that my wife would have to pass when she becomes a U.S. citizen, the idea that this is somehow either racist or unfair, to me seems ridiculous. No one is being denied the right to vote. In a case like that, what it means is you have a share in running the machine, but you don't get to run the machine until you know how the machine works. Seems reasonable to me. Texas is another great example because of the legislature, right? They meet, 2 weeks every 2 years? You know why? Because when you've got laws and protection of rights, why do you need people working 24/7 to come up with new laws? Why? What do you need it for? You don't. It's another great example of Texas. There was a discussion, kind of never really got serious, but it was presented seriously. And I want to say I think it was Vermont. But basically somebody made the case that there are so few people living in Vermont that if every conservative in the country moved to Vermont, they'd take it. They'd do whatever they want with it. They would politically own it. I don't know. Here's what I do know. California gets worse every day. It becomes more and more unmanageable every day. And I'm not seeing signs. We'll know in 25 days or 26 or however long the election is. But I'm not seeing signs that say that that liberals are learning their lessons. I used to think that they were. I don't see those signs now. We're going to find out. We're going to find out. If it turns out that Trump wins the election, and I still think that there are people out there who say that they're not going to vote for him or don't answer the polls or the phones, but they're tired of watching their cities burn. I cannot imagine a liberal in Milwaukee who's lost his business to Black Lives Matter voting for Joe Biden. But then again, I see many things that surprise me. Is it New Hampshire? I might have said Vermont. I probably meant New Hampshire. Mr. Subtle says, what can you imagine if Trump wins California? If Trump wins California, then everything I just said is negated. If Trump wins California, or if Trump wins, period, then that's an indication that reality has collided with the American mindset to the degree that people understand that if you continue to vote for progressives, this is what's going to happen. The reason I'm not filled with despair. I'm just looking at the reality of it. If they win, that means that people have been so conditioned by the media to not look at what Trump did because they've never heard of what Trump did. They just have been told he's a tyrant and he's colluding with Russia, and people believe it because they've never heard anything else. If Trump and the Republicans lose, then that means that people have been so influenced by the media that they are voting for their buildings to be burned down and their businesses to be burned down. And that's how much influence the news media has. So, there we go. Like I said earlier, there's this talk goes both ways. I mean, there really is a divorce going on in this country politically. People are just things are getting further and further and further apart. And one of the advantages to having one conservative state, just one, would be that I am without question convinced it would be the safest and the most prosperous state in the Union. I have no doubt about it whatsoever. And it doesn't matter if they gave us it doesn't matter what state. If it was just one state, then that would be the laboratory. But it works the other way too. And there are a lot of people out here saying if Trump wins, they want to take California out of the Union. And as I said before, as a Californian, I would vote in favor of that. Nothing would make me happier than see California leave the Union and have it go the other way around. Then great, you can continue to have your failed state, and your 52 electoral votes are gone, and without California, Democrats never win again. But I guess in conclusion, I mean, I'm getting lots of interesting comments, but I don't really have a whole lot more to say, and I'd rather not just talk about nothing. I think in conclusion, we are in a world where California politics, Gavin Newsom's autocratic rule, homeless people underneath every overpass, a 13% state tax that they're talking about taking to 19%, absolute endless list of orders and regulations, and the legal requirement to put your mask on between bites of your food while you're eating outdoors because restaurants have closed, movie theaters have closed, and they're gone and they're not coming back. This is on the horizon for the entire country, and it is not trivial. It is a non-zero chance of this happening. We got to think about what we're going to do, and I just wanted to take this opportunity. So if it turns out we have to have this conversation for real in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, then I would like to have had some of this under my belt. So I'm just going to close by saying, does anybody have without specifics, this makes sense to anybody? This whole anvil's going to the bottom is tied to your child. You either cut the rope or or everybody goes down. Okay. A lot of people, I'd like to hear from as many people as I possibly could, because one of the things that I like most about conservatism is that it is predicated on the rule of what is. It's predicated on reality. And we can hate the reality of it, and we can be appalled by it, and we can be shocked, and we can be angered, and all of it, but it doesn't change it. So, yeah, the anvil part is clear. The course of action is fuzzy. It is fuzzy. I don't know what to do about that. But I do know we will see. There's a great thought. America won on November 4th, 2016. I have zero concerns despite the left's rage and riots. I hope you're right. And I think you're right. And I pray you're right. But part of this whole idea of a philosophy that is dealing with reality, and a philosophy of adults, philosophy of listening to Mike Pence and listening to Kamala Harris spend 4.5 minutes not answering the question about packing the courts. If you're committed to a view of reality, you got to be prepared for the worst case scenario. That doesn't mean you expect it. That certainly doesn't mean you want it, and it certainly doesn't mean you're going to stop fighting. But you have to have some kind of plan. Trump beat Biden in the California primary. I think that means something. I thought that meant something too, and I don't know where these numbers are. I don't know whether I think Trump did get hurt by this. I think that the lie that the media has been telling about the economy and the virus has hurt Trump quite a bit. I don't know if it's hurt him enough to cost him the election, but I think it's hurt. I think it's hurt him quite a bit. I personally wish that Trump had said, there was some. Remember, he was saying we're gonna be going back to work on Easter. I think he should have stuck to his guns there. But in any event, we'll see. I can tell you there are little signs of encouraging news, little things, I have seen 2 Biden stickers in California. 2. The person that cuts my hair is a big old Trump supporter, and that's the only reason why we continue to do that. But so are the 2 gay men that own the salon. They're big Trump supporters too. And if anybody ever found out about that, they'd be out of business. No one would come to them anymore. But they're huge Trump supporters. And while I'm not counting on those 2 votes to save us, I am putting a fair amount of faith in that dynamic. When it all comes down to things, it all comes down to enthusiasm. And I don't think there's any question that Trump's got the enthusiasm. The question will be, will the endless lies that you hear on a daily basis be there? Last thing, I guess, because it's important, since we haven't talked about it since it's happened since the last show. But the President of the United States got COVID-19. And then he had the unspeakable gall and audacity to survive it. That's unforgivable to them. It's what I did my show on. Heather McDonald said he violated the law of maximal risk avoidance. And I just thought, people say, oh, he looked kind of breathless, he looked kind of winded. It's like, yeah, I'm sure he was winded. And I'm sure he was quite sick. And by the way, I've never seen Donald Trump worse than he was in that first debate against Joe Biden. That's the worst I've ever seen him. And I thought, just little things, I thought his makeup was splotchy and weird. I think that when Trump was having that debate, I think he was sick as a dog. I really do. I think he was really... I think that explains a lot of why he was so combative. I think he was really, really ill that night. And, and then after all of this gloom and doom of this episode, by the way, folks, I thought it was a catastrophe, that the first debate. I really did. I thought it was just a catastrophe. I wake up the next day and I find out that 3 out of 4 Hispanics thought that Trump won the debate. Find other people like the liberals saying that Trump dominated the debate. I would like to see another debate. I think his decision to not do the virtual debate was a gigantic mistake. And Dave Big Booty says COVID caught a case of Trump and died immediately. But see, this is the thing. This is the thing that they can't. Guys, the difference between the blue and the red, the difference, when you get right down to it, bottom foundation level granite difference between blue people and red people in this country is that blue people are cowards. And they're afraid of everything. They're especially afraid of dying. And if you said to them that there are things worse than death, they would look at you as if you had... They wouldn't know how to equate that. They would say, what do you mean that there's something worse than death? Me dying is the worst thing that can happen. What does it matter after I'm dead? And this is it. And all of the things they vote for, are the things that people vote for when they're afraid of things. They want guaranteed income. It's going to be a miserable income, okay, and everybody's going to be poor together, fine. And you're going to have to wait in line for bread, but the bread will be there, right? Yes, you will be guaranteed bread, and I don't have to work, meaning I'm not responsible for the bread. The bread's going to be there, yes. We'll take it. I think it was Eric Fromm wrote a book called Escape from Freedom. And the idea, and this is based on his research, the idea was that for a large number of people, freedom is too stressful. Freedom means that my paycheck is not guaranteed. I have been living... I'm trying to think of the last time I had a guaranteed paycheck. I'm going to say it was the Miami Planetarium, so that would mean I've been living 40 years without a guaranteed paycheck. I've been living for 40 years having to hope I can find enough money next month to pay the bills. Not dependent on a stable company. It's just been 40 years of a gig-based economy, and it's perpetual stress. Endless, perpetual stress. But this is the choice I made, and I'm not afraid of it. And when you get down to all of these things, you find that, well, I don't want to. Well, why do you feel like you have to wear a mask? You're 20 years old. Your survival rate is 99.9994%. And that's if you test positive for the virus, and only 20% of the population is going to test positive. What are you so afraid of? Well, I'm afraid of dying. Well, I just gave you the numbers. These are the actual numbers. Yeah, but I want to hear it from an expert. And now you're on the main vein then when you hear that. Well, the experts say, anytime you hear anybody say that, it's the same thing with the COVID-19, same thing with the climate change. Anytime you hear somebody go to the experts, what they're saying is, they're saying that I am unwilling to accept responsibility to think about this for myself. I am unwilling to make a decision based on the data. I want somebody else to make that decision for me. I don't want to find out how dangerous it is. I'm too afraid of it. I don't want to deal with the numbers. I want somebody in a white coat to tell me when it's safe for me to go outside. That's what we have a third of the country for now, maybe more. And they're afraid of everything. And all of the things that they want are based on fear. They want to eliminate free speech. Why? Because you may say something that would offend me. And that makes you feel uncomfortable? Yes, when I feel uncomfortable, it offends me. So you're afraid of being offended. Yeah, so this whole thing is based on your fear of somebody saying something you don't like? That's right. I don't like what you say. but I'm not afraid of it, and I don't need to take away your right to say things that I think are insane and destructive and, in fact, murderous. I don't have any desire to limit your ability to say that, because your speech and your opinion does not affect me in the least. Your opinion affects me to the degree that I'm willing to let it affect me. Let me pull up. Did I read this last show a couple weeks ago, that quote from Frederick Douglass? I'll just read it to you from my Forgotten American Heroes script. Give me 1 second. Booker T. Washington, who, if we had listened to, we would live in a nation of hardworking people who were filled with harmony and mutual respect, based on the fact that nobody was asking for special treatment and no one was being considered inferior to anybody else. Booker T. Washington found himself having a private conversation with Frederick Douglass, who was born 20 years before him, at least, I would say. Frederick Douglass had a lot more experience with racism and slavery. Frederick Douglass was a full-grown adult when he was a young man anyway. When he escaped from slavery, Booker T. Washington was 5 or 6 when the Civil War ended. But he had a chance to talk to Booker T. Washington, and this is in Up From Slavery, which is one of the best books I've ever read. And I want to read this for you, because this doesn't just apply to black people. That's the entire point of the Booker T. Washington episode, is that this isn't for black America, this is for everybody. Let me just find it, because it's really worth it. In fact, not only is it worth it, I think it should be on our money. No, back when we had money. I'm sorry for the dead air, but it's worth the wait. If you just give me 1 second. Where the hell is it? Hang on. Trust me when I say it's worth it, and I don't want to butcher it. I got to get it exactly right. I hate this when this happens. It's just the most annoying thing in the world. Okay, got it. This is a direct quote. I pulled it. It is a cut and paste from Up From Slavery, written by Booker T. Washington, and he's describing a chance he had to speak with Frederick Douglass one-on-one. And this is, from this point forward, are the words of Booker T. Washington. Quote, "At one time, Mr. Douglass was traveling in the state of Pennsylvania and was forced, on account of his color, to ride in the baggage car, in spite of the fact that he paid the same price for his passage that the other passengers had paid. When some of the white passengers went to the baggage car to console Mr. Douglass, one of them said to him, 'I'm sorry, Mr. Douglass, that you've been degraded in this manner.' Mr. Douglass straightened himself up on the box upon which he was sitting and said, 'They cannot degrade Frederick Douglass. The soul that is within me no man can degrade. I'm not the one that's being degraded on account of this treatment, but those who are inflicting it upon me.'" And that went through me like a hot poker, and I bolded it. They cannot degrade Frederick Douglass. They cannot degrade him because he would not be degraded. They can punish him, they can hurt him, they can whip him, they can do any number of things, they can put him in his own compartment, they can do all of that, but they can't degrade him because he will not be degraded. This is a two-part operation. Somebody can inflict horrible pain or horrible hardship on you, and they cannot humiliate you unless you are willing to become humiliated by it. Period. And I just said, God, that is fabulous. They cannot degrade Frederick Douglass. He's sitting in a box in the back of the train. He's paid the same amount of money as people riding in the first class car, and he's a famous celebrity, and he's treated like this. No, I'm not degraded by this. They're degraded. They're degrading themselves by it. And I thought, my God, Republican, Frederick Douglass, Republican, Abraham Lincoln, Republican, Booker T. Washington. All of it. And we end up listening to W.E.B. Du Bois, who grew up in segregated neighborhoods, went to study at Harvard and Berlin, where he learned about communism. Yeah, no, let's just listen to him. Just give us the money and the talented tenth, the 10% of the black population that is capable of thinking, we'll distribute the money. That's W.E.B. Du Bois's position. He was a Democrat and a socialist, and that's what we ended up doing. Oh, and there's another one. I didn't put this in here, but somebody just put it in the comment section. And this is Booker T. Washington in a nutshell. This is Booker T. Washington now, not Frederick Douglass. I shall allow no man to belittle my soul by making me hate him. When you hear this episode, which we'll probably record, I think we're shooting the first one's on the 16th, so we'll probably record this, I think, around the 20th of this month, a couple weeks from now. When you see the Booker T. Washington episode, and you listen to this guy's voice, and you realize what a catastrophic mistake we made. The thing that is so shocking, I know this I've said before on previous Stratosphere Lounge, but I'll just close with this because it bears repeating. In the face of this, you've offended me, therefore I'm going to shut you up. Booker T. Washington earned the respect of white racists. And the reason he did it was because he said to them, we are not coming here from some other land to impose our will on you. We have grown up with you. We're your neighbors. You have depended on us and we have depended on you. He basically went to them with a spirit of reconciliation, which the modern world is called basically Uncle Tom Cravenism. But basically what he said was, there's no reason for me to antagonize you and force this on you. What I'm saying is good for both of us. It's good for both of us. I'll read you this. This is the speech that made Booker T. Washington famous. Did I just close it? I'll read it again. I'm just going to cheat on it, but there it is. This is awesome. So Booker T. Washington made a speech in Atlanta in front of incredibly large numbers of mostly powerful Southern white racists who were former plantation owners, former slave owners, and these are politicians, financiers, all of them. And he got up in front of them and made a speech. And I'm just going to read to you one part of that speech. All right. So he starts off the speech by telling a story, by an anecdote. And he begins the speech by saying, a ship lost at sea for many days suddenly sighted a friendly vessel, he began, and from the mast of the unfortunate vessel was seen a signal, water, water, we die of thirst. It turns out that ship had been out at sea for so long that they had no water and they were dying of thirst. So they sent a signal to another ship saying, we need water. And the ship signaled back, cast down your bucket where you are. Meaning, put a bucket over your side and drink that. And they sent the message back again. They said, you don't understand. We are dying of thirst. We have no fresh water on this ship. We need you to help us. Send us some water. And they got back the message again. Cast down your bucket where you are. Well, since nothing else was going to happen, they cast down their bucket where they were. And they took a drink out of it. And it was fresh water, because they were anchored in the estuary of the Amazon. So then Washington turns to the audience. There's black people there and white people. He speaks to the blacks and he says, to those of my race who depend on bettering their condition in a foreign land or who underestimate the importance of cultivating friendly relations with the southern white man, who is their next door neighbor, I would say, cast down your bucket where you are. Cast it down in making friends in every manly way of the people of all races by whom we are surrounded, every manly way. Cast it down in agriculture, mechanics, in commerce, in domestic service, and in the professions. Cast down your bucket where you are. Don't cry about it. Do something right now with your neighbors. But much more importantly than this, he turned to the white former slaveholders. And they'd never heard anybody like this before. And here's what he said to the white audience in the Atlanta speech. He said, to those of the white race who look to the incoming of those of foreign birth and strange tongue and habits of the prosperity of the South, meaning people coming in from the north and from overseas. Were I permitted, I would repeat what I say to my own race. Cast down your bucket where you are. Cast it down among the 8 million Negroes whose habits you know, whose fidelity and love you have tested in days when to have proved treacherous meant the ruin of your firesides. Casting down your bucket among my people, helping and encouraging them as you are doing on these grounds now, and to education of head, hand, and heart, you will find that they will not only buy your surplus land, make blossom the waste places in your fields, and run your factories. Nearly 16 million pairs of hands will aid you in pulling the load upward, or they will pull against you the load downward. We shall constitute 1/3 and more of the ignorance and crime of the South, or 1/3 of its intelligence and progress. We shall contribute 1/3 to the business and industrial prosperity of the South, or we will prove a veritable body of death, stagnating, depressing, retarding every effort to advance the body politic. No race has anything to conclude. No race that has anything to contribute to the markets of the world is long in any degree ostracized. It is important and right that all privileges of the laws be ours, but it is vastly more important that we be prepared for the exercise of these privileges. And here's his close. In conclusion, may I repeat that nothing in 30 years has given us more hope and encouragement and drawn us so near to you of the white race as this opportunity offered by the exposition. Only let this be kept constantly in mind, that far above and beyond material benefits will be that higher good that, let us pray, God will come in the blotting out of sectional differences and racial animosities and suspicions, in a determination to administer absolute justice and a willing obedience among all classes to the mandates of the law. This, coupled with our material prosperity, will bring into our beloved South a new heaven and a new earth. And then the room just exploded. Just everybody leapt to their feet in applause. And the newspaper people present telegraphed their newspapers back at in Philadelphia, New York, and said, "We have heard the most amazing speech we've ever heard. We have heard hope for the future. Hope for the future." And for this, he's vilified as Uncle Tom who sold his race out, because he decided that he'd rather make friends with the people that he lives among rather than make enemies out of them. His whole, practically reading the whole script here, when he was appointed the director of the Tuskegee Institute, he'd gotten an education at the Hampton Institute, which was set up by it was a Christian missionary, Christian mission to educate black men. So Booker T. Washington went to Hampton Institute and was so outstanding there that when a group of people, white people in Alabama, decided to open up a higher education school for blacks in Alabama at Tuskegee, they wrote to Hampton and said, "We need somebody who knows how to do this." And the guy wrote back. He said, "Well, then Booker T. Washington's your guy." And these Southern white, supposedly racist, said, "Booker T. Washington will be wonderful. Send him at once." So he gets to Tuskegee, he pulls up his roots, and he goes to Tuskegee to be the director and head professor at the Tuskegee Institute. But when he gets to Tuskegee, what he finds is there is no institute. It's an idea. There's no buildings. There's no ground. They don't own any property. There's nothing. Nothing. It's an idea. There's nothing there. So he starts running the school out of a shanty shack in the back of a black Methodist church there. And he says that when it rains in the South, and it really does rain in the South, he said that what would have to happen is one of the people would have to give up their studying and come up to the front and hold an umbrella over me while I read the text, because otherwise the book's going to be ruined from all the rain coming through the roof. So anyway, he goes to another former plantation owner and says, "We need wood for the facility." And the guy says, "You have unlimited credit with me. Whatever you want. We'll supply the wood for the building, and you can pay us back in the course of a year." And Booker T. Washington said, "Well, we have to pay you something now." So they did, and their credit was immaculate. They paid it off. But here's the point. Finally, he realized they're going to need a brick building, and there are no brick yards in Tuskegee, or in the entire county, in fact. So he decided that the students, the black students at Tuskegee, would have to make their own bricks so that they could build their own brick building. And they built a kiln, and they laid out these bricks, and it didn't work. And they built another one, and that didn't work. And they did a third kiln, and that didn't work. And at that point, they were out of money. So Booker T. Washington gets on a cart or whatever, and he goes to a nearby town, and he takes his wristwatch, and he pawns it for $15. And using the $15, he builds another kiln, and this one actually works. So they start making bricks. He goes back to get his watch, but it's too late. The watch has been sold. So he basically has the Tuskegee Institute building bricks. Here's another quote from him, because I use the brick as a metaphor throughout the whole thing. Whoops, that's the wrong script. Listen to this. So he did this back in the 1870s, 1880s, to start building our own bricks. And listening, here's what he had to say in 1901 when he's writing Up from Slavery. So this is after 15, 20 years of building bricks. Here's what he said. Brickmaking has now become such an important industry at the school that last season our students manufactured 1,200,000 of first-class bricks of a quality suitable to be sold in any market. The making of these bricks taught me an important lesson in regard to the relations of the two races in the South. Many white people who'd had no contact with the school and perhaps no sympathy with it came to us to buy bricks because they found out that ours were good bricks. They discovered that we were supplying a real want in the community. The making of these bricks caused many of the white residents of the neighborhood to begin to feel like the education of the Negro was not making him worthless, but that in educating our people of the neighborhood, but in educating students, we were adding something to the wealth and comfort of the community. As the people of the neighborhood came to us to buy bricks, we got acquainted with them. They traded with us and we with them. Our business interests became intermingled. We had something which they wanted. They had something which we wanted. I have found, too, that it is the visible, the tangible, that goes a long way in softening prejudices. The actual sight of a first-class house that a Negro has built is 10 times more potent than pages of discussion about a house that ought to be built or perhaps could be built. So, there you go. That's what I believe in, and that is anathema today. Anathema. If that message got out today, the left would be finished. And that's why Booker T. Washington is being vilified. And that's why I'm fighting for him, and that's why you're watching the show, and here we are. But this is what we believe. This is our message. That message that you just heard is ours. We own it, and that message of reparations and privilege and grievances and words that some people can say but others can't based on the color of their skin and all of it. That's their message. It's not our message. This is our message right there. And anyway, that's it. I think that'll do it for me. My 2-hour rant is over. And thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for the feedback. It was a pleasure to talk to all you folks about this, and I'm certainly hoping that this was a contingency plan that we're not going to need. But in any event, this is a variation of the truest thing I've ever heard, which is it is better to be on the ground wishing you were in the air than it is to be in the air wishing you were on the ground. So, anyway, this show is made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com, to whom we are eternally grateful. And I mean that on a daily basis. We are grateful on a daily basis for the studio, for the work we do, for the house we live in, all of it. Very grateful. So, thank you for your continued support. And we will see you, I think the scripts will be done, so hopefully we'll see you next Thursday right here on the Stratosphere Lounge. You guys take care. We'll see you soon.